That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you, and we are on the cusp of real Bears football. Training camp is right around the corner, so we are going to do our tradition here on Bears Banter, our yearly training camp preview, our mega two-parter. And we're going to do it this year with Zack Pearson, of course, the beat writer, Chicago Bears beat reporter, I should say, for Bear Report. And Zack joins me now. Zack, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Let's see. As we're recording this, we are literally 2 weeks away from report date. So yeah, excitement's getting there. And before we know it, man, we'll be, dissecting everything going on in training camp. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and I think training camp's going to be interesting. We're going to get into some of the specifics of what I think the Bears media in general is going to be looking at specifically with some certain position battles and things like that. But before we get into the offense, I want to kind of just get your general thoughts kind of on the team coming into this year, the changes in the coaching staff, of course, Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen and all there, and kind of compare and contrast, if you will. And this isn't for me trying to pile on Matt Eberflus, but this is, the players themselves, when Eberflus got fired, talked about wanting accountability and everything. So compare and contrast how these OTAs and the offseason program has felt to you this year as opposed to the Eberflus era, and if you could notice anything significantly different.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your first question, I think there's excitement. I think there was excitement last year before, for different reasons. I think this year you're coming off, a off season in which, let's be real, last year was very turbulent for the Bears. Firing an offensive coordinator a month and a half into the season, firing a head coach. Pretty much your pass game coordinator became your head coach and, had to coach the number one overall pick. So they went out and got the best candidate available, arguably the best candidate overall, depending on, your thoughts on Mike Vrabel. But they finally, did something last year that they've never done with, firing a coach in season, now going out and getting the top guy. So I think there's excitement around that. I think they have built around Caleb Williams. They've invested in Caleb Williams. We saw that in free agency and the draft. The biggest thing last year for me was the Bears had to fix that offensive line. They went into this offseason with that plan, executed it. So I think there should be excitement. In terms of, what's different, what I've seen that's kind of, what Matt Eberflus didn't do, I'd say, is I think the coaching is more I'm trying to think how to phrase it, more hands-on in a way, if that kind of makes sense, where it's not just Ben Johnson. Like, it's everyone. It's Antoine Randall, it's Al Harris, it's Eric Bieniemy. They're coaching up these guys like they're getting ready for, the Super Bowl in what, 6-7 months here. Like, and they're not only it's not only like getting on DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. It's getting on guys that, no offense to them, but we're probably not going to hear their names after, training camp. Guys that are going to be cut from the rosters, practice squad players. They're making sure everyone is getting it right. It's very vocal out there. You guys have seen the clips of Eric Bieniemy getting on, Kyle Monangai
Sure.
and other players. And I mean, that's real. That's been all through rookie minicamp, OTAs, regular minicamp. And I'm sure it's been going on every practice because we're not allowed to go to every single one, but I'm sure it's going on every single practice that they're at. So, yeah, I just think, the leadership of the coaches kind of stands out. And it's not to say, like you said, I don't want to pile on Matt Eberflus. It wasn't like he was just out there like, oh, we're doing this and that. I mean, he was coaching, but this just kind of feels different in the way that, like, there's a certain emphasis on getting everything right. And I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I'll point to this. Last year, in training camp, and I think you probably remember this as well, we asked Matt Eberflus numerous times about, are the details and the procedure and the operation, are they right? And he would just say, yeah, everything's good. We're looking good. And then you get out to like week 1 and week 2 and it's false start and it's holding and they can't get out of the huddle and, it's delay a game. So I think Ben Johnson's really making an emphasis that all these details have to be right when they get to week 1 against Minnesota. Otherwise, they're just not going to find success early on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, like I had Herb Howard on right after OTAs and minicamp wrapped up, and he was saying the same thing about this attention to detail and making sure everything's getting right, from the actual plays on the field to even like breaking the huddle properly, and that it's far more detail oriented. The other thing that you said that I love is the idea that everybody's getting coached up the same, whether you're 7th round pick Kyle Monangai or your Cole Kmet, who's getting paid $12 million a year. That idea that nobody is above coaching, nobody is above, if you didn't get it right, getting on somebody and getting back and doing it the right way, and making sure that every one of those 90 players, which is obviously the number right now, is being held accountable, and making sure everybody understands their role on every play, what the concept is, what the goal is, and really, needs to buy in to what Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen's plan is, or that's not going to be a fit here in Chicago.
Yeah, and I think it's even, players that are injured too. Like Colson Loveland has been out there, but he hasn't participated. He's been on the sidelines. And Ben Johnson talked about those mental reps. Braxton Jones, we haven't really seen him. I think I saw him one time on the sideline, but, he's still rehabbing. Like, that stuff goes to the meeting rooms too. It's not just on the field. It's making sure everyone in the meeting rooms are learning the same things, whether you're healthy, whether you're injured, things like that. So yeah, I was impressed that like they are really putting the attention to detail, like an emphasis on that, because you have to get that stuff right. Like like I mentioned, we saw last year too many times they just were not getting out of the huddle in time. Crucial holding calls, illegal formation, illegal procedure, whatever, things like that. And right away, I mean, we've seen Ben Johnson, get on Caleb Williams. There was a play where he should have got the ball out quicker to Roshan Johnson and couldn't do it. And Ben Johnson let him know, like, he's dropping F-bombs out there. He got on Cole Kmet. He's not only making them get back, like, okay, you get to the line of scrimmages, we're not set up right. It's not just, okay, let's restart this. We're getting the entire play in. Like, the entire play call is getting in. You're huddling up like it's a real game, things like that. And, training camp reps are very important. I think that's obviously where things start to pick up. But these reps and OTAs and mini camp, I think they're valuable more for the team than they are the media, in terms of, like, they actually got to do this stuff again and get it going. And these reps are going to have in the offseason. Whether we're just out there and just kind of just telling you guys what we see. But yeah, I think that is very important, to put that attention to detail and making sure everything's right. Because, I mean, you've seen Ben Johnson's offense in Detroit. There's a lot of things that kind of go on. Guys have to be in the right spots, things like that. So hopefully we don't have what we had last year and the year before, where it just, watching training camp, you just felt like things weren't clicking. Like, they were just out of sorts. And that's honestly been the case for, God, I've been doing this since 2017, 16. I can point to several training camps where things just felt off.
Yeah, and that was what was crazy, was when the media like yourself would sit there and be like, yeah, this training camp isn't going well. The amount of fans would get not angry at the Bears, but get angry at the media for not just giving the rah-rah answers. But
yeah,
but let's talk about Ben Johnson for a minute. I think it's interesting, everything you brought up. And I think we'll talk about Ben Johnson throughout this entire conversation about the offense and how he's going to utilize these players and everything. But the one thing you talk about is Ben Johnson dropping F-bombs and getting on guys and everything. And I think that's important, because while Ben Johnson, for the Bears fans, it was wildly a popular choice, there was a small percentage, and I do think small, maybe 10%, that wanted Vrabel, that wanted a different direction, that was hesitant about this because of that phrase we always hear, leader of men, and that Ben Johnson was this math nerd who just needed to be in the room cooking up plays, being an offensive coordinator, and didn't have that head coach mentality. I think Bears fans were kind of worried maybe this was going to be another Mark Trestman. Great offensive mind, but not a good head coach. But from everything I've heard and what you're saying here, the Ben Johnson, this is not a math nerd who's just sitting in the classroom on the whiteboard. This is a guy who doesn't have a problem getting in guys' faces, telling people what they need to know, telling them what they need to hear, most importantly, and really seems like the kind of guy that has the personality, if we're being honest, that can lead a locker room.
Yeah, I never, I think Bears fans have had that thought because, like you said, Mark Trestman and the Matt Nagy thing kind of failed after a year there. And rightfully so. Like, there's just been so much trauma and nightmare of a coaching in this city that, like, yeah, I mean, you should, be a little worried. But I never bought the whole, like, he can't be a leader of men. Look who he's learned from. Like, love him or hate him, Dan Campbell's totally changed that culture in Detroit.
Yeah.
Like, Detroit was a laughing stock. And, people still joke about, him going forward and being aggressive, but he sticks to his plan. It's with Dan Campbell, I don't think it's, is he going to go for it? I think it's, yeah, he's going for it. And you kind of almost have to respect that in a way, whether we agree with it or not. I think Ben Johnson was just able to learn from Dan Campbell, learn from a guy like Aaron Glenn, and kind of develop that trait. I mean, he had other guys, other position coaches in Detroit. He had a roster that, hard-nosed, tough players that challenge him. I mean, look his relationship with these players in Detroit. I mean, he's mentioned Jameson Williams still text him, especially when they drafted Luther Burden. Amron St. Brown, if you look at his podcast, like when him and Caleb were joking back and forth about, the Bears stealing Ben Johnson, he was like visibly upset and disappointed if it was going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, I think that type of stuff speaks to the guy that Ben Johnson is. I just kind of think like all that leader of men stuff, it was just kind of overblown. So far I've seen a guy who's come in, he's taken control, he's taken command, and he's set an early standard. Like, this is what we have to do. This is how it's going to be. If you're not here, like that saying, no block, no rock. If you're not going to do your job, we'll move on without you. So I know it's that you get that 1 year of like that honeymoon where everything's going good. I'm kind of curious to see if they do face some adversity this season, which they will. Every team does. How the players handle it, next offseason. So far, I just don't think that's going to be an issue. I think a lot of these guys really, really love him, and you can hear that when they speak about him.
All right, let's jump over here. Let's talk Caleb Williams. I think obviously that's the guy everyone wants to hear about. So let's not bury the lead any further here, because I think, look, if we're being honest about Caleb Williams' rookie season, we just pull back and look specifically at what he did. He had a lot of great moments. He had a lot of great games, but there was a lot of inconsistency. So when you look, and I think that's where it's a little tricky. When you look at the volume stats, his total yards, and the interceptions were way down, his touchdowns thrown, and you compare him to the other Bears quarterback seasons, it's one of the top 5 seasons in Chicago Bears quarterbacking history.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we look at his EPA per play and his yards per attempt and some of the more advanced, statistics that people like to look at for efficiency, and they were really bad. They were some of the worst in the league, bottom 5 in the league in terms of what he did there. So a lot of it was just volume in terms of attempts. So I sit there and say that as one of Caleb Williams' biggest cheerleaders, going into the draft process and everything. But on the other side, I will sit there and say that this man had 3 offensive coordinators during his rookie season, 2 head coaches, is now obviously learning. Now, look, everyone loves what's in place here for Caleb now, but that rookie season, I think, had to be a tremendous challenge for him. And he had adversity at USC. I'm not saying he didn't, but going through that as a rookie season, your first year as a professional, I think he overcame a lot. And I think it was impressive the amount of success he was able to have on basically what became a dumpster fire of a season. I'm curious from your perspective as someone that was around Caleb Williams frequently. I do think he had a pretty good poker face, but how do you think he handled adversity? Do you think it got to him at all, throughout that season? Everything that was getting thrown in his face between the sacks, the coaching changes, let's be honest, players quitting on plays, that it was a lot going on around him.
I think so. I think a lot of it was behind the scenes, though. I don't think he wanted to show that in front of us in the locker room. In the locker room, he's just a total chill dude. I mean, he's just having conversations with everyone. You get him at the podium, you're not really supposed to talk to him in the locker room, but he'll talk to you on the side for a little bit, or brief conversation. I felt like he was frustrated, but I also felt like he was professional about it. Like he wasn't really going to throw anyone under the bus in season during that stuff. And now, after the season, a lot of that stuff came out with his father and how frustrated they were and the whole pre-draft thing. So be it. But facing that adversity, I mean, like you said, man, like they gave away a game in Washington. Like, we can blame Tyreek Stevenson. Yeah, he deserves blame too. I still think the play before was just, and how Matt Eberflus handled it. Like, not only doubled down after the game, tripled down like the next day about how those 8 to 9 yards didn't matter. And if you look at the Hail Mary, Daniels left it a couple yards short. So yeah, I mean, those yards did matter. So, I think coaching really didn't do the Bears or Caleb Williams any favors last year. I think you could point to 2 or 3 games that they definitely cost them at least a shot to go to overtime, if not a win. And, you watch that Minnesota game, Caleb Williams essentially willed them back into that game, forced overtime. They did go 3 and out, but I mean, he did enough to get them in a position to win or have a shot at winning. But yeah, I think, he was frustrated. I think, I don't think he has any regrets going to the Bears or anything like that. I just think, like, when you go through a season and all that you mentioned of the different offensive coordinators and the head coaches, it gets tiring. Also getting hit, getting sacked 68, whatever it was, how many times he got sacked. And he deserves some blame for that. And I think CJ Stroud, what he said was like, you got to get down. Like, you got to limit those hits, because this isn't college where Caleb Williams is, probably the best player on the field more often than not. This is an NFL game where linebackers are faster, defensive linemen are faster, and they're looking to headhunt, and they're looking to not hurt you on purpose, but they're looking to put a big hit on you. So I think he's kind of got to learn on that. But what you're talking, what you said too, all those advanced stats not looking good. And correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have a different opinion on this, but I felt like he was just kind of playing it too safe because he felt like he had to, because he probably wasn't, like, their offensive system wasn't very good and what was going on. And I felt like the pressure was mounting. And, he just at times wasn't, playing how he should have played. And I'd like to see him take more shots down the field. Obviously, the accuracy has to improve down the field, but I'd like to see him take more shots on the field and take the checkdowns when they're there.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree. And I do think whether it was, offensive coordinators, but I think mostly it was Matt Eberflus. And I think this isn't a knock on Eberflus. It's a knock, honestly, on defensive-minded coaches. I think a lot of them have that mentality that they don't want to risk turnovers, don't want to risk potentially giving up a big play on the wrong side of the ball. So they end up going a little conservative. Like, I'll go back to what Matt Eberflus did with Justin Fields, and you have to assume some of this carried over to Caleb Williams with that 2-0-0. He told Justin that was the goal. 2 touchdowns, 0 turnovers, 0 sacks. And to me, that just beats the abilities, the special talents that a guy like Fields, a guy like Caleb Williams have. And I'm not talking, obviously Justin Fields had his shortcomings, but this is a guy that had a big arm, that had explosive, legs, that could make big plays. And you're saying, no, I want you to sit in the pocket and not screw up. And you have to figure that carried over to Caleb Williams some as well, that mentality. And look, Caleb's kept his turnovers way down last year, which was great for a rookie. But like you said, the sacks were way up. And I think that's the one thing I think that Ben Johnson needs to figure out. And I think he will, a way to harness Caleb Williams is making sure he knows when to try and be, a gunslinging superstar, right? Yeah. When is the right moment to just, all right, things are breaking down, just roll out, see what you can do, make your throws on the run, be special, be who you can be Patrick Mahomes kind of thing. But at the same time, 80% of the time, let's stay in the pocket. Let's make sure you're making a quick read and getting the ball out quickly, and the offense is going to march down the field.
Yeah, and live to play another down too. When the check down's there, take it. Obviously, like you said, you don't want to take out that quote unquote Superman part of his game, because we've seen it. Like, when he gets out of the pocket, sometimes when play breaks down, he can make some of those throws. It's also, kind of bailed out maybe a little too early at times. So yeah, I like to see him, give his guys better chances too, give Roma Dunze a chance, give DJ Moore a chance. But yeah, I'm kind of curious how much the coaching impacted that. And I guess we'll find out pretty soon when the season starts, how much of an impact Ben Johnson will have. And, I keep going back. I believe it was in his introductory press conference where Ben Johnson, said he wants to build this from the ground up and work from the ground up with Caleb on everything. So I'm wondering how much they're going to change on that, how much he saw in film review of what Caleb needs to do in terms of mechanics, also in terms of decision making, kind of the mental side of it. But yeah, I mean, we see Caleb, he's got that ability. Like he's told us, I mean, he idolized Aaron Rodgers. He loved Aaron Rodgers' game, and Aaron Rodgers took chances, but he was also very smart, and he also was very gifted as a thrower. Love him or hate him. I mean, the guy could throw the ball like almost no one else. We've seen him make some crazy throws, and I feel like that's in Caleb. I mean, we've seen it in practice in OTAs. He zipped the ball in between a defender's arms. You're like, wow, how the heck did that ball get there? But then he's also made some throws across his body over the middle of the field that's been picked off. I'm more fine with that in these practices because I want him to kind of test that, know his limits in this game. Because he's still adjusting. Like I think he knows the NFL is a faster game. The athletes are just top notch, but it's also like a calibration type thing in a way as well. Where you can test some of these guys and you can know your limits on what you can do. But yeah, I just think the accuracy's got to be a little better. I think the decision-making has got to be a little better. I just feel like when you can pick up those 3 to 4 yards and check downs at times, keep the chains moving, keep the drives going, that's good. And this year, I honestly want to see how aggressive he can be down the field and how aggressive Ben Johnson's going to let him be down the field with this offense.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point, and I think a lot of one that a lot of Bears fans are going to be curious about as well. So last thing on Caleb Williams, and let me ask you this, because when I do my off-season series, the 10 Bears with the most approved, I had Caleb Williams number 1, basically with the idea that there are no excuses. He's got the offensive-minded coach. The offensive line is fixed. They have, tremendous weapons on the at receiver end, at tight end. You want to sit there and say they could have a better running back, that's fine. But I mean, there's way too much around him at this point now to sit there and be like, well, if he had this going for him, maybe it would have been a better season. So with all that being said, he's gotten the rookie jitters out of the way. We're in year 2, an offense that should really be able to make him shine. Where are you at this point after seeing a year of Caleb Williams? What is his ceiling and what is his floor at this point? Because to me, and when I say this isn't like saying he's the exact same player, but to me, his floor, and I've seen like PFF and some people be like, oh, he could still be a bust. I don't see it. His floor to me in terms of a career is kind of like Kyler Murray. I think he can throw 37, 38, 100 yards, 20 to 25 touchdowns. And I think that's the floor. And I think that's fair. But I still think his ceiling is that he could be a top 5 quarterback in the league, that if things come together and him and Ben Johnson gel, that he can be mentioned in the breath with Lamar and Burrow and Allen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was going to say someone like Kyler Murray. That PFF, I don't know where the heck that thing came from. I feel like that whole article is just, honestly, I thought Daniels was probably the only one they got right. Maybe Bo Nix, maybe. But yeah, I would agree. I think floor is probably Kyler Murray. Ceiling is that top 3-ish quarterback, top 5-ish quarterback. He gets a lot of crap nationally from the national media for whatever reason. And I think a lot of that's just talking points to pass the time in the offseason and guys that, aren't around the building, don't really do a lot of deep dive on essentially what happened last year. You mentioned he went through 3 offensive coordinators, 2 head coaches. The game management by the coaching was just awful. It was a lot to overcome. And he still had a pretty damn good rookie season. It was not like he was out there and threw 15 interceptions and 10 touchdowns and got 2,000 passing yards. He had a really and he started all 17 games. That's the key to me, is he was durable, he was healthy. So yeah, I think this is a guy you're looking ceiling MVP type player, top 5, top 3 potentially. And then probably floor, like you said, probably Kyler Murray, which, to me, I think I don't know if it's disappointing because he's a number 1 overall pick, but he'll always be compared to the Jayden Daniels if Jayden Daniels, keeps ascending. So that's kind of the tough thing too, is, you're going to get that comparison where, Daniels both could be top 5. We don't know. So yeah, I would probably agree with what you said, honestly.
All right. Well, this is a training camp preview, so we'll talk about some of the depth here as well. So before we move off the position, a little bit about QB2 with Tyson Bagent and Case Keenum. How much of a competition do you think this is? I think I love the Case Keenum signing. I think he's going to be great for Caleb Williams, kind of being basically an assistant quarterback coach in that room. I think that's going to be tremendously helpful for Caleb. But at the same time, I kind of went back and watched a little Case Keenum over the last 3 or 4 years on the field. It's not good. That guy that threw 20 some touchdowns for the Vikings and whatever that was, 2017, or that guy's long gone. So, when I sit here and obviously Bagent has his limitations as well. Is there much of a competition here? I mean, I think both of these guys are going to be on the roster, but who do you think emerges as the second quarterback on the team?
Yeah, there's a competition going into camp. I think we'll probably see Tyson Bagent probably separate himself pretty early. I think he's probably the favorite to be the number 2 quarterback. They were splitting reps and OTAs in mini camp with the second team, each taking a day and alternating. Yeah, I mean, I think it's Bagent. Like you said, I also looked back at like Case Keenum tape, and he had the injury last year, I think it was, so he didn't play. Yeah, he's not the same guy that was firing the ball all over the field in 2017 for the Vikings. He's got his limitations, but it's also a signing, like you said, more to help Caleb Williams, more to have that veteran presence in that quarterback room. Who'd they have last year in that quarterback room as a veteran presence? I mean, it was
just ripping for the preseason.
For the preseason, and he went to Minnesota. So, yeah, I think that was an important signing. I think, like you said, he's going to be on the roster. You'll have him there. I think it's more of a mental, having that veteran presence, ability in that locker room that's really going to stand out. So yeah, I think it's going to be Bagent. I think Bagent will be the starter, and or not the starter. I'm sorry.
Yeah, QB2. Right.
Yeah, QB2. Don't clip that, please. No one clip that. That'd be a nightmare. Be quarterback 2 and win that competition.
Mark Carman would be very excited that you think Tyson Bagent is going to be QB1. Yeah.
Yes.
But let's move on to the offensive line here, because obviously that was something a lot of Bears fans were concerned about. And I love the approach in the offseason. I'm a guy who criticizes Ryan Poles a fair amount, but and whether it was Poles, Ben Johnson, both of them together, doesn't matter. The fact that, because I kept sitting there going, I don't know how they're going to fix this interior. There's just not, Will Fries, he's coming off an injury. Like, I couldn't figure out how they were going to fix this offensive line with the free agency that was available, because they needed to really overhaul everything. Yeah. And they went out and they did it via trades with Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. And I am not as big of a Drew Dahlman fan as a lot of other people, but at the same time, I sit there and say, this is a solid center. Yeah. This is a guy who knows what he's doing. He's the best center the Bears have had, at least since those couple years with Cody Whitehair. He's probably better than what Cody Whitehair was at his peak as well. So you're talking about the best player the Bears have had, maybe since Olin Kreutz at that position, which is a great compliment to Dahlman. So when I sit here and look at this offensive line, to me, the best thing that this is going to be able to do, assuming they play well, is produce confidence for Caleb Williams, because every former quarterback I talk to, it is like, if you don't trust your protection, your passing game is just screwed. Like, it doesn't matter. And I feel like Caleb tried to trust his protection early in the season, even if it wasn't great. Like, he sat in the pocket and he got drilled and stuff. And I feel that second half of the season, you could just tell, like, the feet got a little happier. Like, he was bailing out a little early. I think he just knew he was going to get sacked. He just, like, dropping back. He felt he was getting sacked before his eyes were even looking downfield at all his options. So I feel that was a tremendous negative to this team, not just the sacks, but the lack of confidence that he was going to be able to stay upright each play. And I think when you're talking, and we'll obviously get into this left tackle position, when you're talking about whoever wins this left tackle position, even if it's Braxton Jones, that they're probably the worst of the starting 5 when that unit is healthy. And a year ago, you could have made the argument, because Darnell Wright's still developing, that Braxton Jones was the best of the starting 5. That's a tremendous change from one season to the next.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, man. How many times have we had to criticize Ryan Poles and ask, like, when are you going to fix the offensive line? Like, what's going on here? And I think your point of Caleb not trusting the offensive line, that's where the mental stuff starts to get in. quarterbacking is mental, physical. It's a lot of things. Like, you're not going to trust your offensive line if guys are coming untouched through the middle, guys are coming off the edge, and it's not all Kieran Amagaji's fault. He missed time, and they had to throw him into the fire, and guys are going right around him and things like that. So, yeah, I liked what they did. I'm probably a little higher on Drew Dullman than you are, which is fine, and I can see the criticisms of him. I can see it both ways. I'm with you as well. I think he is probably their best center they've had in a long time. And it's at least right now, it's at least an attempt at a solution. Like, yeah, you probably want to get another center eventually, a young guy, but you look at the guys in the draft, they just weren't in position to take them. You're not going to take that center at number 9, number 10, like, the past couple of years. And they got Jackson Powers Johnson goes before you have a pick and things like that. And on day 2, I believe it was. So yeah, I think they tried to address it at least. I would agree that you look at that offensive line, and Darnell Wright is you need him to be that anchor at right tackle. He needs to take another step up in his game, I believe. Then you have the inside, going out and trading for Joe Thuney, trading for Jonah Jackson right before free agency was important. Because you look at the guards out there, and who did you really feel comfortable in as a free agent? Like you said, Will Fries was hurt, I believe. He still got paid. But are you comfortable with him? Or are you comfortable with someone like Joe Thuney or Jonah Jackson? I'm probably taking what the Bears did. And you have to look at how Ryan Poles probably evaluated this draft. He probably knew Will Campbell was not going to be available. Probably started to get the idea that Calvin Banks was not going to be available when the Rams, who was it, Ramzak or not the Rams, Saints, was it Ramzak and their other, is it Penning that kind of moved on at tackle. So, it's almost playing like the long game and seeing what you have available to you and making the best decision. But I like it, man. I look at that offensive line, and last year it's just too much pressure up the middle and just too many times. Like, you couldn't rely on a guy like Tevin Jenkins to stay healthy. And you had so many questions at center and at times right guard, and the Nate Davis thing didn't work out. And it's just, you had to do something. And I think Ryan Poles probably made some smart moves here with his offensive line, but I don't know. Do you want to talk left tackle? Because I feel like that's obviously, the big.
Yeah. Let's get into left tackle here. And last thing I'll kind of say on the overall offensive line, the one thing that I don't hear a lot of people talk about that I love is, and we'll just go with the argument for this statement that Ozzie Trapillo wins the left tackle job, which I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll get into that in a second. But Darnell Wright, as of right now, has 3 years guaranteed to be here. Year 3, year 4, 5th year option. Jackson, Dahlman, and Thuney now with extensions are all guaranteed to be here 3 years. Ozzie Trapillo is guaranteed to be here 4 years. Even Karan Amagaji, if he figures it out behind him, guaranteed to be here 3 years. The Bears now have a core offensive line. And probably not all these moves work out, but if they do, all these guys are here for 3 years. That's continuity on an offensive line. And I can't remember, Zach, the last time the Bears had the potential to have that level of continuity. Probably the early Ryan Pace years with the Massey, long, white hair group.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Immediately, my mind went to was that 2010 line pretty similar? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I mean, the Super Bowl line was was pretty damn good, I'd say. But Kyle Long, Massey, all those. Yeah, Charles Leno when he was healthy.
Right. Leno was part of the group. Yep.
Yeah.
They had 4 guys. That group had 4 guys. They never quite, James Daniels, and there was a bunch of guys getting into that left guard.
Yeah.
But other than that, they had 4 guys pretty consistently there for a couple, 3 years.
And it's a good point. Like, they extended them, they extended Thuney, they have Jackson, they signed Dahlman to that deal. Even if, like you said, even if Braxton wins the job this year, you still have Ozzie Trapillo right there at left tackle. I don't think it's as big of a question mark, if Braxton leaves after this year. It's not, oh man, they have to, obviously if there's a left tackle you go out and trade for, it's all pro or Pro Bowl type, which, if that someone like that's available, there's obviously a reason why, because guys like that just, don't become available. But, you don't have to go out and make that big splash. The continuity on the offensive line is going to be very important. Even if they hit on, if Jackson doesn't work out, You hit on Tooney and Dahlman. That's still successful in my
Sure.
eyes. I think that's great. I would even argue if Tooney struggles even just a little bit and Jackson doesn't work out and Dahlman turns in a Pro Bowl year, I still think that's a win because I think center's been the position they've really needed to lock down for years and just haven't been able to do it.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about left tackle. I think this is probably the training camp battle that is going to be the most interesting because it's impactful. And look, I think there's a lot of question marks. Like, when is Braxton Jones going to be able to get on the field? I think when the injury happened way back in December, and you kind of talk about it at the end, he'll be ready for training camp. But miss OTAs, he'll be ready for training camp. Now we're hearing limited to start training camp. Like, is this, do you have any idea how long this is going to linger for Braxton Jones? And obviously, if he's not on the field, that's going to give Trapillo and potentially Amagaji a huge boost in the left tackle battle.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Braxton once or twice. I think I mentioned that. Obviously not doing any work. I try to look at it this way. In training camp, if you're injured, I try to spot you right away. Are you on the bike? Are you on the sideline? Are you out there for stretching and going back and getting treatment? If you're on the bike, it's probably a decent sign. But also, I've seen guys on the bike for weeks and they've never really come back. So it's kind of tough to judge. I think with Braxton, man, it's going to be interesting. Will he be ready day one? Right now, I can't confidently say he'll be out there full go day one. I think this is going to be a thing where he could miss the first couple practices, maybe ease his way back in. And if that's the case, he misses or he doesn't really get those first team reps for the first week or two. Like you said, there's Ozzie Trapillo, there's Kieran Amagaji trying to get those reps. I still think right now it's between Braxton and Ozzie Trapillo. I think Kieran is probably the third guy in that rotation, has a lot of ground to make up. I think Ozzie is been pretty good this offseason. Excuse me. But now you have to go in training camp. This is where the live stuff happens. This is where the reps really matter and count. It's kind of hard to make a prediction on who's going to win that job.
Right.
I'd probably still lean right now Braxton if he's healthy. But like if Ozzie wins it, I'm not going to be surprised at all. I think he's been pretty good this camp, this offseason so far. But yeah, the biggest question is going to be, is Braxton going to be out there right away? And we'll get that answer. And that's probably going to be the first or second question asked to Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson. And, the funny thing is, and I kind of want to bring this up, is we've heard, the left tackle with Darnell Wright, and nothing's really come of it. And it's just kind of funny to me that we've heard it. I think Ryan Poles was actually the first one to bring it up. And Ben Johnson talked about it as well. They keep bringing it up, and then we don't see Darnell Wright out there at left tackle. So, yeah, I think we can kind of put that to bed a little bit. I'd be shocked if we got out there and they lined up Darnell Wright at left tackle like day one and threw us for a loop. But yeah, I'm curious to see how this left. Like you said, it's gonna be the position battle to watch out there. And hopefully Braxton's healthy, because if both are healthy, I think that's a sign. Or that's a good thing, because if Ozzie wins, you kind of know you have Braxton Jones. If Ozzie struggles or Ozzie gets hurt, you have kind of that security blanket in a way at left tackle, which they didn't have last year. And the other way around, if Braxton gets hurt again or he struggles, you have Ozzie to come in. And then behind him, you have Kieran as potential swing tackle or your third left tackle. So, yeah, that'll be definitely the talking point out there.
Yeah, let's do one quick one on Amagaji, then kind of get more into the left tackle, because I agree with you. In fact, I have in terms of training camp battles, I talked about the left tackle position, and I kind of think it's kind of like there's two battles going on. I think it's Braxton Jones and Trapillo for starting position, and then it's Trapillo against Amagaji for the backup position if Trapillo doesn't win that, because I just don't feel like Amagaji is going to take the step up. Now, look, it's OTAs, it's shorts, there's no pads. I get that, but heard some people saying that Amagaji didn't even look good in the spring. Is that something you can confirm, or is that something that you thought was kind of overblown?
Yeah, I would confirm that. Now, like you said, it is shorts. It is, you can use your hands to block, but I mean, these guys aren't going full, let's line up and let's hit. when I try to evaluate the offensive line in mini camps and OTAs, and even the first couple of days of training camp, because there's no pads, I'm looking, is a guy just going right around my left tackle or right tackle? And who is that guy going around him? If Montez Sweat's going around Darnell Wright pretty easy, I'm not as worried. If Austin Booker's going around Darnell Wright, I'm like, okay, that's something I got to kind of note. I will say, I wish I didn't bring my notebook down here, but there were a couple times where I noted like Huron did let a couple guys go by him. But again, how I evaluate it's probably different than how the offensive line coaches evaluate, how Ben Johnson evaluates it. But I'll say this, I don't think there was anything in my eyes that shows confidence that Kieran's going to win the starting job or even be that second. I think, like you said, he's battling probably for that second job. Now, could that change? Yeah. I mean, last year you look at Kieran and you know this, when you're a rookie in the NFL, you're behind. Some guys progress faster than others. Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, guys like that, even Caleb Williams at times progress faster. When you miss training camp, you're in trouble as a rookie. I mean, you're just way behind the ball. So I don't think last year helped him a lot. I think a full year of that training camp will help. I also wouldn't give up on him right away either. I don't think you should cut him or throw him out or anything like that. I think you got to let the kid develop. He's a project who's probably going to be a project from the start. He just kind of, got thrown in the fire after being behind. But yeah, I'd probably confirm that he didn't look spectacular or great out there.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. Look, I haven't given up on Amagaji. Yeah, like you said, everyone who follows football understood that this was a project. He's an Ivy Leaguer coming off an injury. The tape, toolsy guy with all the right attributes, but even the tape in the Ivy League wasn't exactly a dominant force. Yep. So like it was going to take some time. He shouldn't have been on the field at all last year. This should have been the first time he was kind of getting his toes in the water. So we'll see where this goes. Now, if you ask me at this point, I would say more, which side of the fence am I on? More likely he's not going to work out than he does work out, but we'll see. And I think if you do hold on to Braxton Jones and Ozzie Trapillo, however that shakes out, where the loser of that position is the swing tackle and Amagaji's your fourth tackle, I think that does, that leaves you a nice safe spot for him to try and develop this season. And then in year 3, you'll have an idea if this guy's going to turn into something or not. But I think you're right on the left tackle position. I think if Trapillo's going to have to take this from Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones can't lose it. Trapillo's going to have to win it. But the only way that happens if Jones just can't get on the field, then I suppose in that case he's going to lose it. But if both of them are on the field, it is fascinating to me. And then you sit there and go, well, what is the thought in terms of long term? Like if it's close, right, with Braxton Jones and Trapillo in training camp, do they want to go with the veteran guy out of the gate because they can know that he's been through the ringer and understands what's going to happen after 3 years in the league? Or do you go with the rookie and sit there and say, well, Braxton Jones isn't going to be on this team in 2026, so let's give Trapillo the reps during the regular season, and he's going to have the higher ceiling with the team at that point. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that exactly plays out.
That's a pretty interesting point, and a good viewpoint of that too, because you also have a guy in Braxton there that wants to put out good tape because he test free agency and find a new team and things like that. So yeah, and they're both, while Trapillo's worked at the left tackle, the one, splitting those reps, he's kind of got some familiarity now with Caleb Williams. Caleb had some games last year with Braxton Jones, live reps, so he kind of understands and kind of knows what to kind of feel when Braxton's out there. So if it did come down to that, and they're both, let's say quote unquote too close to call, you probably lean with the veteran. I'd say the guy who's probably had the reps in the regular season with Caleb Williams, but that doesn't mean they be pretty quick to make a switch if things go downhill with Braxton Jones and he struggles. They're not going to hold back, and if they feel like Trapillo's ready to come in and if Braxton's struggling, they're going to make that move and see what they got in that rookie.
Yeah, and last one on the offensive line. Let me ask you about the backups around the interior, because Like that's to me, like, I think the Bears are going to have a good swing, whether it's Braxton or Trapillo.
Yep.
Obviously, we talked about how improved the starting line is. They can't do everything. So this isn't a complaint to Johnson and Poles here, but the backup interior group is pretty dreadful to me. So it's kind of cross your fingers that all these guys stay healthy.
Yeah.
You know, I loved Ricky Stromberg coming out of the draft, but that injury he had in Washington, I don't know what kind of player he is anymore. I'm not a big believer in Doug Kramer. I like Bill Murray a lot, but you know, is he going to be able to be a guy that you can rely on? Ryan Bates doesn't seem to be able to get on the field at this point anymore. So there seems to be a lot of questions, and you could pretty much, Jordan McFadden's in the mix there too. Like you could pretty much tell me, you know, that, you know, they're going to have probably two backup interior guys, assuming Amagaji and the other guy is the swing tackle, and they keep 9 offensive linemen. Like you could tell me it's going to be Ryan Bates and Jordan McFadden. You could tell me it's going to be Bill Murray and Doug Kramer. I really have no idea how this interior backup is going to shake out. And, you know, I know they got the rookie, the 6th-round guy from Michigan State, Newman. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but whoever does win it, I'm just not going to have a lot of confidence in them if they have to play.
Yeah, if you're seeing some of these guys play, there's something went wrong. It's either an injury or something just went totally wrong. And when we're out there and we look at the offensive line combinations, you pretty much get your starter set. You make a note of, you know, Amagaji or Ozzie are who's in there with the first team. Other than that, though, you kind of look at the second team. And this year, I mean, I had just so many different numbers. And the second, third teams like interchanging on the drives. And I'm like, there's just really the only one that honestly was pretty much you could just write in essentially on the interior was Doug Kramer as the backup center at times. So, yeah, I mean, does Luke Newman, to me, kind of feels like a guy that might try to stash on the practice squad?
Yeah, that's what I think.
I just, you know, Bill Murray's he's going to be ahead of him. Like I said, you have guys like Jordan McFadden who has experience in this league. I think honestly, the only one, and like, I'm not, you know, if Doug Kramer's playing center, the Bears are probably, you know, it's a downgrade from Drew Dahlman and they're probably going to be in trouble, but he's probably the only guy you can kind of feel maybe decent about on that second line in the interior. Like other than that, man, it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out, you know, in training camp. And I think this is going to go on for a while. Like, I think they're going to need the full preseason to see who's going to be their backups. It's not a good situation, but it's a better situation than what they had last year. There's questions on the offensive line as starters. Now you got questions as backups. Right. I'd rather take that than the starters. But yeah, man, you know, if Jonah Jackson goes down or Drew Dahlman goes down, Joe Thuney, yeah, you're probably in trouble. You look at somebody like Ryan Bates. I just haven't seen him. And I don't know if maybe he shows up for training camp and he's out there, but yeah, haven't seen him. You know, some of these guys like Chris Glazer's out there, McFadden, you know, Bill Murray, Luke Newman, Stromberg. No one to me, I'll just say no one to me in my notebook. I've been like, wow, okay, there he goes. Like that's a guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. I don't think people are going to be focused on that one as much, but a nerd like myself, I will absolutely be paying attention.
I'm the same way, man. I'm like, every time they line up, I have to double check. I'm like, okay, who's here, who's there? And I try to watch because I think with this Bears defense, I mean, I think we're going to see some of these guys, like you're going to see Gervon Dexter probably get a couple of second string reps. It's just kind of natural just to get them some reps because they have so many guys in this line that can kind of make an impact. How do they go up against, you know, these guys? How do they go up against an Andrew Billings and a Grady Jarrett when they do get those reps? Even Austin Booker too. So yeah, that'll be kind of interesting to watch training camp as well.
All right, let's get to some of these skill position guys before we wrap up the offensive conversation. Let's start in the running back room. I think a lot of Bears fans kind of want to talk about DeAndre Swift and if he can handle it. And look, I think the big thing here is what kind of relationship do Swift and Ben Johnson have? I still look at the Detroit Lions situation where Swift was RB1 and then Ben Johnson took over as offensive coordinator and he got demoted to RB2 for Jamal Williams, not for David Montgomery, not for Jahmyr Gibbs, for Jamal Williams, who had a tremendous season in Detroit and then went to New Orleans and went back to being his usual like 500-yard a season type guy. So I wonder if Ben Johnson is comfortable with DeAndre Swift as his RB1. He may just sit here and be like, well, we couldn't fix everything in 1 year. It's going to be DeAndre Swift this year. So give me just kind of your assessment on the running back room overall. If you think Swift can be Johnson's top back, Monangai versus Roschon behind him, Ian Wheeler, if you think there's anything there. And, I'll even throw out there, if you think there's a chance, a guy like Kenneth Walker or someone like that, potentially they could trade a conditional sixth and beef up the room.
So if you believe everything that Ben Johnson and DeAndre Swift say in the public, they both love each other, and DeAndre Swift's going to be running back one, and everything's good right now. I tend to believe they'll go into the year, it's going to be DeAndre Swift as probably their starting running back. I was always, when those rumors were out of trading for a guy or signing a guy, I always pointed to the Seattle situation where they have Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. I always thought, and you probably agree with me, I always thought they were kind of like the two backs that made more sense, that would fit better in my eye. Who knows? Maybe the Bears pull off a trade for someone like that. Jamal Williams is still out there as a free agent. I know Albert Breer connected it was like back in June, right? Now it's kind of starting to go viral again, I want to say. I don't think they're going to bring in a running back right now. I think they're going to go into training camp with what they have. Man, this might be a little surprise. I think they really like Roschon for some reason. I really think he could be like their backup, but Monangai, I think, will get some reps. I think he'll play. I don't think they're going to sit him right away and have him learn. I think they'll throw him in the fire. The one thing we got to watch, though, is the pass blocking. That's very important in this offense. And watching Monangai's tape at Rutgers, you kind of see those flashes. He's kind of, a smaller guy, but kind of built like a wrecking ball in a way, which is good. He's not afraid from contact. The thing with Swift is, man, he didn't have an awful season last year, but also you look back at those first 5 weeks, his yards per carry were 1.3 or something like that, or low twos maybe. Had a couple games where he turned it on, but then kind of fell flat, I think, towards the end of the year. He's got to be consistent. He's got to have that consistency all throughout the year for this offense to find success in my eyes. I'm curious, how much the reps are split with Roschon and Monangai, but so far, it's been primarily Roschon would be the second back. If I were to, go off what I saw, I would say probably it's Roschon right now.
Yeah, all right, and that makes sense to me. And look, I think you're right, and I'm not a big DeAndre Swift guy. Before he was a Bear, so that's not a hindsight kind of thing. But I will say this, you have to be fair. Like you said, it was awful the first few weeks. It wasn't really his fault. He had nowhere to run. The Indianapolis Colts play, of course. He was set up to fail a lot.
Yeah.
So we'll see with a better scheme, better offensive line in front, if he can have a more productive.
LaDainian Tomlinson's not scoring on that play. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. It was doomed before they snapped the ball. Yeah. If you just looked at the defensive alignment, it was insane. But I do think the Roschon thing is interesting. I know a lot of Bears fans are excited for Monangai. I'm curious to see what he, 7th round pick, but could have been maybe a 5th round pick if the running back class wasn't as deep as it was this year and a lot of other seasons. But look, I was a huge proponent of drafting Roschon when they did. I thought he had RB1 potential. I don't know if he does anymore. I'm not there, but he is useful, and not just because he's a solid special teams guy. He can block, he can catch a little out of the backfield. He's kind of that guy that I feel like Ben Johnson would embrace, that type of personality that he has. And despite the woeful stats he put up last year, the one thing that was really high for him was success rate running the football. And look, I understand he didn't have enough carries to qualify, but his success rate put him 4th or 5th in the NFL against qualifying backs if he had a higher volume, but he didn't because he was just short yardage. He averaged 2.5 yards a carry. Yeah. The stats look awful, but in essence, Johnson did what he was supposed to do on every play. He was only supposed to pick up 2 or 3 yards because he was going out there on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1, and he was getting those first down more often than not. So I think if Johnson is potentially used better, I do think there is a role where we could see him back around 4.5 yards a carry and maybe getting 600-700 yards.
Yeah, and look, it's not going to be what Detroit has in David Montgomery and Jameer.
No,
it's not going to be anywhere close. The Bears missed that opportunity, and it's not their fault. The Patriots took the guy that they really liked, Travion, Henderson, out of Ohio State, and I think the plan was, let's get another back in here. Let's draft a back that we could pair with DeAndre Swift. And looking back at that draft, when the Bears made those trades, if you look at the picks, like 3 to 4 picks in front of them, it was a running back. The kid from Oregon went when they made another trade, I think on day 3. There's another example too. I got to go back and look. I think they wanted to pair someone with DeAndre Swift. But you're right. With Roschon, man, what I like, he gets those tough yards. He falls forward. He's a tough runner, but he's also got to stay healthy. He had the concussion. It's tough. And, those take a toll on you. So, yeah, he's got to stay healthy. With Swift's future, man, you look at the money they could get and then save. I know it's early. We joked about mock drafts earlier in this, but like
every mock draft has Jeremiah Love going to the Bears.
Exactly.
Everyone.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like that's going to be the trendy pick. I'm sure, there'll be a running back that comes out of nowhere again this year and takes off. Probably not to the Ashton Genty level we saw last year, but someone where if the Bears are picking 16, 17, 18, maybe 20s, because you feel like Jeremiah Love's probably going to be top 10 right around that area. The Bears could take. They just have to they have to find a solution for that for the future. But the game now, you can take running backs in the draft and kind of just cycle them out every couple of years. I mean, it happened to DeAndre Swift too in Detroit when they took him and they came back. They signed Montgomery eventually. They traded Swift. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. So yeah, they got to find that long-term solution still.
All right, let's wrap up the offensive conversation with the pass catchers. Let's start more with the tight ends. I think that's really interesting with Loveland, of course, being the number 1 pick of the team a year after giving Cole Kmet a contract extension. And to me, I know a lot of people are, well, that's it. He's taking Kmet's job. But I think they are different tight ends with different skill sets. And to me, I think there is a chance that when Cole Kmet's got 3 years left on his deal, I think there's a chance Cole Kmet is here for all 3 years of that deal, where then at the end of that, that's the year that you would get Colston Loveland an extension if he turns into the guy that you're hoping he becomes. I think there's a really good chance that Ben Johnson lives in 12 personnel. And I hate to bring this up just because of one of the names I bring up, but to me, this has the potential to be the kind of 12 personnel that the Patriots have with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, where it's going to be potentially the most lethal 12 in the league. And I know people, well, Ben Johnson used 12 in Detroit, but didn't have a pass catcher as his other tight end. Well, now he does. Yeah. So just because he didn't have one in Detroit doesn't mean he's not going to be able to utilize it here. We keep talking about how Ben Johnson builds his offense around the guys he has. And I think the Bears have some real potential here at 12 personnel to really create some mismatches. I don't know if Cole Kmet has just been replaced rather than been complemented.
Yeah, I didn't get that feeling at all either. I get it's like probably the easy thing to kind of connect the dots in a way. Oh, they just drafted a tight end, they're going to trade one. I mean, look behind them though. What's the depth behind them? Like, it's not very. Are you going to trust guys behind them that can come in and fill that role, like Durham Smythe, Joel Wilson? I mean, Steven Carlson. Like, you're not. I'd rather go into the year with Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland as my 2. And honestly, into the future, let's see how this works. Like, to me, Cole Kmet does not seem like the type of guy that if his role, which likely will take a little bit of a step back if Colston Loveland's healthy, like the targets will probably be down a little bit. That's just natural. He doesn't seem like the guy that's going to come out. Yeah, I want to be traded. I want out of here or anything like that. I don't get that vibe from him. I think they, like you said, they could have pretty lethal duo at tight end in that 12 personnel. They're going to want to run that 12 personnel a lot. Look at what Ben Johnson did in Detroit. And now you got a more, I'd say, natural pass catcher runner. And look, they could put Colston Loveland in different spots. Like, they might line him up in the slot sometimes, things like that. Like, it's going to be interesting. The pick kind of shocked me just because admittedly, I didn't really do a lot of homework on Colston Loveland. Was it Tyler Warren out of Penn State was the other guy that connected the dots. Well, then after the draft, I went back and looked. I'm like, he's got that natural pass catcher, almost like that wide receiver type body.
It's got the Sam Laporta look.
Yes, and I don't want to say, Brock Bowers, but like when Brock Bowers was coming out last year, you could view him as a wide receiver. I mean, he was just a pass catcher, a hell of a player at Georgia. He's kind of got that vibe, not to the Brock Bowers extent where he can come out and just have an incredible rookie year. But yeah, I just it makes sense now why they took him, and I think there's the plan. Like you said, the plan is going to be 12 personnel. We're going to get both guys involved, and let's not forget Loveland hasn't been out there. He should be ready for training camp, but Cole Kmet's getting those reps, and Cole Kmet's a veteran as well, and I think it's going to be fun to see what they do with this offense, and you throw in Luther Burden and Roma Dunze and DJ Moore and Zacchaeus and guys like that. They have some options out there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of here. And I think that's interesting. And a couple other things on the tight ends before we kind of dive into the receivers and wrap up this part of the episode. The Cole Kmet thing and the critics thing. And look, I've criticized Kmet plenty. Yeah. I'm not sitting there saying I just applaud the guy, everything he does. The one thing you hear that's the negative on Cole Kmet is, well, what is he great at? He's not great at anything. And I tend to agree. I think that's a fair criticism. But my counter to that is, what is he bad at? Because to me, this is a guy who, he's not really great at anything, but he's a solid pass catcher. He's a solid red zone threat. He's a solid run blocker. He's a solid pass blocker. He's not great at these things, but he's not bad at any of them either. And you find me, other than George Kittle, and I'm not putting him in Kittle's category because Kittle's great at blocking and great as a pass catcher, and those guys are unicorns. But who is a Y tight end in the league that is pretty good at just about everything like Kmet is, where he is just a useful player? That's the one thing I don't think Kmet gets enough credit for, is being pretty good in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and also the tight end position is so weird now too. Like you have this very top heavy, and then you have like a bunch of guys that are just kind of there in that range. And like you said, I mean, what is Cole Kmet like really bad at? Like, could you criticize the blocking? Sure. Well, a little bit. It's not like he's awful and he's whiffing every time he's blocking or anything like that. He's also a good security blanket too. And he's good for couple of those games a year where he's going to be a red zone target. He's going to get you a touchdown or two, 70 yards, 5-6 receptions. And now with, Colson Loveland, these other weapons, they're going to get the attention of the defense. And maybe Cole Kmet slips out and you find him as your check down, or you can kind of sneak him over the middle of the field, things like that. So yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I don't think Cole Kmet is bad at anything. I don't think he's great or an elite tight end. I think he's good enough for what you want to do with this offense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that assessment. Let's wrap up here with the receivers, because like you said, we've got a lot of options here for this offense in terms of what Ben Johnson could potentially utilize. And with the idea that they can do 12 with these guys, and to the traditional 3 receiver sets with potentially Luther Burden. And even if Burden doesn't vibe with the offense right away as a rookie, Zacchaeus I think is a very underrated signing. Where I think the plan when they signed him was like, this is our third wide receiver, and we're going to be very happy with him as our third wide receiver. He can block, he can operate in space. He can do a lot of things around the line of scrimmage. He's a useful player. And then Burden's sitting there with that pick, and they're like, all right, we're going to do this as well. And, I think Duvernay is going to be more the returner and special teams guy, probably not a big role on offense. But I think those top 4 guys are going to be interesting in terms of how they all see the field. Is there going to be a guy that just ends up with 6-7 snaps a game and doesn't really play? Because, the Bears may have a situation where they have too many mouths to feed, which is not something that has happened too often in the history of the Chicago Bears offense.
Yeah, we're usually over the years, we're looking at who's going to be their third guy, and we're just throwing out random names, you know what I mean? Or even second guy, if you want to go back to some of those bad, like 2017 rosters.
Yeah, remember the 2017 receiving core?
Oh, man. Oh, God. I remember there was one guy late in the season, and he caught a pass against Detroit, and I literally had to look. I'm like, who the heck is this guy? I was like, I don't think I've ever heard of this guy. And thankfully they don't have that this year. They have a good problem, I think. I think they have a pretty good problem. And like Zacchaeus, to me, man, he was pretty good in OTAs and in minicamp, getting open, Caleb finding him. Like you said, I think he could be a very underrated signing, a good guy that if Luther Burden's not ready to take over that wide receiver 3 role, you see Zacchaeus take it over, which could be the case to start the season. Or heck, even as a 4th guy, if Luther Burden emerges, that's solid. In terms of the top 2 guys, DJ Moore is, we all know DJ Moore is. Roma Dunze is probably the guy you want to take the next step and kind of have that chemistry, with Caleb Williams, build on him more. But after that, Zacchaeus, you got Luther Burden, Duvernay, and then you have Tyler Scott kind of battling for that roster spot. I'm very curious on what happens with Tyler Scott, because last year, I don't think it was a great camp, but it wasn't like he was bad at all. And I thought, okay, maybe this guy can get a couple reps, and they just did not put him on the field. Different coaching staff, which, doesn't always help your case. I think more often than not, it's probably a negative, but yeah, we'll see. They got a couple guys that could battle for that last spot. And it comes down to special teams. What can you offer? It's a numbers game. What can you offer on special teams if you're battling for that 4th wide receiver spot, that 5th wide receiver spot? You're not going to cut a guy like Duvernay, probably in favor of Tyler Scott. I think Duvernay offers a lot more in special teams. But if Scott wants to make this roster, you gotta show something on special teams as well. But it's a strong wide receiver group. And I think it's a group that we keep talking about. They've invested in Caleb Williams on offense. They've given him targets. They've given him guys, not only with Loveland, but, you sign Zacchaeus, you draft Luther Burden. I hate when people too many mouths to feed. I just hope it's not that situation where, you're in a spot where there are too many mouths to feed in a way. I think the Bears, Ben Johnson, find a way to kind of handle that. And he's got weapons here, more weapons here, I'd say, than in Detroit in terms of the receiver group. Detroit, you always had Amon St. Brown and Jameson Williams. But after that, it was just a couple of guys that were just solid role players that did their job. Now you got Luther Burden, who could turn into a really damn good wide receiver, a guy who, many people thought should be a 1st-round pick going into this draft.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be fascinating. Let me ask you about DJ Moore when we're talking about mouths to feed. Maybe the most important mouth to feed, because I agree. I think Roma Dunze, he's gonna get plenty of target share. He doesn't have to be the top receiver this year. Will he make that step up and be on the verge of breaking out? But the DJ Moore, and you said it earlier, the no block, no rock situation. Yeah. Do you think DJ is going to be a full buy-in here? Because I think that's the big question here. Is he was frustrated last year. I think DJ Moore at this point would fully admit that he was frustrated. I think some Bears fans went too far to try and defend some of the stuff he was doing on the field. It really, I didn't think DJ Moore was that kind of, I'll just say, diva type personality, but I understand the entire team was a problem last year. So I'm not going to just single him out. But I do wonder if he's going to really buy in about getting across the line of scrimmage, making the blocks he has to make, if he's only getting 5 or 6 targets a game.
Winning changes everything. When you win, you're happy. When you're losing, it takes a toll on you. And whether these guys admit it publicly or not, he's been with the Panthers, who've just struggled year after year. Now it's time with the Bears. They've struggled year after year. So I think a lot of it was frustration. But like you said, it's not an excuse. You still have to go out there and you're getting paid. You got the extension. You have to go out there and do your job as well, especially for a young quarterback like Caleb Williams last year. That stuff just can't happen. Talk about the Arizona game and maybe checking out a little bit early in some of the other games. But, he's already, what he said, he said he's already gotten a little bit of a talking to or Ben Johnson already got on him once about things like that. So I don't think it'll be an issue early. But if they start losing, man, this stuff just gets too frustrating for players. But again, professional, you have to kind of deal with it. I don't. DJ is a very calm, reserved type of guy when he's in the media. I don't think he's a bad teammate or anything like that. I think he's a great guy. I think he is a good teammate. But yeah, you gotta have him mentally be there every game, because that's a guy that Caleb Williams is going to look to if the game's on the line. We saw it against Green Bay. They made that adjustment. They ran that route over the middle, and TJ raised his hand. He threw the ball in the money. So I think DJ will be fine this year. I do really do.
Yeah, love to hear that. So 2 quick ones on offense here to wrap up this part of the podcast. Yeah. Number 1, if assuming the Bears do the traditional 25 offense, 25 defense, and 3 special teams for their final 53-man roster, I look at this offense and say there's one spot open. They're going to the 3 quarterbacks, the 4 running backs, 9 offensive line, 3 tight ends, and there's 5 receivers, I think, that are going to make the team. So that 25th spot, you can take Joel Wilson at tight end, you can take Tyler Scott at wide receiver, or you can take Ian Wheeler as an extra running back. Who do you think? Who would you keep, and who do you think the Bears keep? Maybe it's the same person out of those 3, I think, or even maybe Miles Boykin as a 6th receiver. Who do you think grabs that 25th spot on offense?
So of those 3, I think Wheeler's probably the one you might be able to get away with bringing back if you cut him. Probably Joel Wilson too. I feel like Tyler Scott would be a player that probably lands on a roster or gets probably claimed on waivers or something like that. To me personally, I would lean more a tight end, just because you got the 3 with, Kmet, Smythe, and Loveland. I think the depth behind that's just not very good. And if one of them goes down, you're probably in trouble. So I would probably keep someone like Joel Wilson. You threw the Miles Boykin in there as that's kind of a curveball one for me. But yeah, I mean,
good special teams guy.
Yeah,
that's why I brought it.
Well, that's what it comes down to as well. And it's a numbers game. You have to have that special teams value. And we've seen guys over the years make the roster due to special teams. I would probably take someone like Joel Wilson. I think that'd be my pick. I think the Bears, if I'm looking at the Bears angle, I think it would be, see, they really love Ian Wheeler though, man. Like I know they really love Ian Wheeler. I think the Bears should probably take Ian Wheeler. I think they would.
All right, interesting. All right, last one. We did floor ceiling for Caleb Williams. Let's do floor ceiling this year for the offense in terms of where they can rank in the league. Where do you think the ceiling is in terms of where they can be? Where is the floor in terms of where this offense is? It top 20, top 15, top 10? Where can this offense be?
So ceiling, I think could be top 10. If everything goes right, everything clicks, top 10. My realistic, I think they're probably going to be 12, 13, 14.
Okay.
Floor for me, I don't think they're going to be a bottom 5 offense. I think floor's got to be like top 25-ish in a way, if that makes sense. But that's, injuries, stuff like that. I just think there's so many bad teams, bad offenses this year that it'd be really hard for the Bears to be a bottom 5. If the Bears are a bottom 5 offense with all these weapons, oh boy.
Oh God. Yeah. Even if that offense, like you said, is 22, 23, we're going to wonder what is going wrong. That's certainly, there's going to be some finger pointing for sure. All right. 100%. He is Zack Pearson. He's going to be back with me next week for part 2, where we focus on the defense for this training camp preview. This is Bill Zimmerman, Bears Banter. We'll see you in a week. Adios.